And we're going to look into the book of Joshua in the Old Testament. The fifth book in the Old Testament. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, and then the book of Joshua. Whenever Miss Kathy and myself, back in 1985, our little son came along, I thought I'd give him a Bible name that nobody else was using. So we gave him the name Joshua, later to find out that that was the most famous boy name for the year. Everybody was named Joshua. But I still like that name because of this story and Joshua's life in the Old Testament. I won't try to reintroduce him before this message because I'll be doing that in the Bible. But if you look in chapter 1 of Joshua, I want to read the first few verses and then we'll get right into the message. Let's go through and read verses 1 through 9. Joshua chapter 1. Anybody besides me like these Old Testament stories? Boy, I just love them. I just love them. And there's just so many insights and stuff that you can gain. And some people say, well, we're in New Testament days. When Jesus came, he did away with all that Old Testament. No, he didn't. He did away with the Old Covenant. If you read that Old Testament, it's still there. In fact, Paul in the New Testament said all those things are written for us to learn from. So dig in, learn, and there's plenty there, and there's plenty here today that we're going to look at that I think that will be good for at least someone with listening ears. We'll see. All right, let's look at verses 1 through 9, Joshua chapter 1. And it came about after the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord, that the Lord spoke to Joshua, the son of Nun. And you remember John Hall years ago used to say that Joshua had no daddy, because right here in the Bible said he was the son of Nun, had no parents. Anyway, N-U-N, okay? God spoke to him, Moses' servant, Moses' former servant, now Moses is dead. And he says in verse 2, Moses, my servant, is dead. Now therefore arise, cross this Jordan, you and all this people, to the land which I am given to them, to the sons of Israel. Every place on which the sole of your foot treads, I have given to you, just as I spoke to Moses. From the wilderness and from this Lebanon, even as far as the great river, the river Euphrates, all the land of the Hittites, and as far as the great sea toward the setting of the sun will be your territory. No man will be able to stand before you all the days of your life. Just as I have been with Moses, I will be with you. I will not fail you or forsake you. Now, when I'm reading this, I put Dallas's name in there. Now, it came about after the death of Moses that Lord spoke to Dallas. Okay? He wants me to personalize this. You put your name in there. When these Old Testament characters there, you put your name in there and let God speak to you. That's what he wants it to be personal. That's why it's written down for us. So you just soak it in just like he's talking to you. Let's move on from there. So, verse 5 again. No man will be able to stand before you all the days of your life, just as I have been with Moses. And he's telling you the same thing. He's telling you and I as believers, just as I have been with Moses, believer, guess what? I will, not might be, I will be with you. And he says, I will not fail or forsake you. Isn't that great to know? We could just go home right there, couldn't we? That's good right there. Somebody needed that this morning, didn't you? Well, you got it. There it is. Now, here's what you got to do, though. Look at verse 6. Be strong and courageous, for you shall give this people possession of the land which I swore to their fathers to give them. Only be strong and very courageous. Be careful to do according to all the law which Moses, my servant, commanded you. Do not turn from it to the right or to the left, so that you may have success wherever you go. Here's one of my favorite verses. It's not the scripture for today, but this is a good verse. This book of the law shall not depart from your mouth. Now, why would you say that? In seminary, they told me this book, this Old Testament, was written in such a way it meant to be read out loud. it was be read out loud. So I guess that's what they meant. While you're reading it, you keep reading it. Don't let it depart from your mouth. But you shall meditate on it. Don't just read it. Meditate on it day and night, so that you may be careful to do according to all that is written in it. For then you will make your way prosperous, and then you will have success. Who wants to be prosperous and successful? Anybody besides me? All right, there's the recipe right there. Verse 9, have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not tremble or be dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you some places you go, right? No, he's with you wherever you go. All right. The name of the message today, the title, rather, the big thing for a big assignment. The big thing for a big assignment. By the way, I just want to say it's good to see my Aunt Bert here already. She drove all the way from South Carolina just to hear me preach today. I appreciate that, Aunt Bert. Now, really, she got together with brothers and sisters, and I think they had a good time yesterday. All right. The big thing for a big assignment. Before I give you the big thing in this message, let's talk about this big assignment. The big assignment, Joshua was to take over where Moses left off. He was to lead the people into the promised land. This is the assignment that God was giving him. Joshua was the new leader of Israel. He was taking over where Moses had left off. Moses led them for 40 years through the wilderness and up to the promised land. Now God had assigned Joshua to lead them into the promised land and lead them through battles to take possession of the land. The children of Israel were assigned property in the promised land, but they had to possess it. They were going to have to fight for the land God was giving them. And it was Joshua who would lead them against 17 nations: the Amalekites, the Ammonites, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Edomites, the Gibeonites, the Gershurites, the Girgashites, the Gezerites, the Hittites, the Hivites, the Horites, the Jebusites, Kenites, Moabites, and the Perizzites. All of them were a bunch of parasites, right? That's all they were. And that's why the Lord was getting rid of them. He made it clear to Israel. He said, look, I'm not going to drive these nations out because you're so good. I'm not going to drive them out just because you belong to me. It's because these nations are wicked that I'm driving them out. So there they are, all the parasites. You could just use that one word. You could describe them all. 17 nations, but whose assignment? It's Joshua's assignment to lead these people into battle. And the Lord done said, look, I'll be with you. No man is going to be able to stand against you. Wherever you go, I'm going to be with you. And listen, whatever he calls you and I to do, guess what? He's going to be with you. He's going to go with you every step of the way, whatever he's called you to do. Now, not everybody's called to be a leader, but everybody's called to be something. You might be the follower. You might be the servant that follows leadership. But Jesus, God's word, the Lord says, I will be with you. Now let's look at a little bit of background here on Joshua. The beginning of the new assignment, we've said that here in verse 2. Then there's a presentation of the assignment that has already occurred before this. So Joshua isn't just now in chapter 1 getting this commission from the Lord. He got it back in the previous chapter, back in the book of Numbers, actually. So it's been 2 chapters ago that he was assigned this task. And I thought that's interesting because just about everything God has ever shown me to do, he's told me in advance and kind of let me get prepared for it. And that's what he was doing with Joshua. All the while he was in the Old Testament in the wilderness those 40 years. Guess what? God was preparing him to one day take over where Moses was going to lead off. And he probably didn't even know that was going to happen yet. But if you look back in Exodus chapter 17, it says that it was Joshua who led the victorious battle against the Amalekites. It was Joshua. And it was Joshua who often would accompany Moses to the top of the mountain called the Mountain of God, where Moses would meet with God. Joshua many times was there. Sometimes he might have had to wait off in a distance a little bit, but he was always accompanying Moses. Numbers 11:28 says he was Moses' attendant from his youth. That tells me from a teenager right on up, he was with Moses. He was following Moses around. He was helping Moses. And Numbers 14, guess what? Joshua was one of the 12 spies that went to spy out the land. He and Caleb and 10 others, and it was Joshua and Caleb who told the truth. And they said, yeah, we can take this land. They were positive. It was the other 10 who said, I don't know if we can make this. I don't know. These people are big. We're tiny. And they discouraged all the people. Yet Joshua and Caleb remained steadfast. They followed God and believed and said, God will help us do this. Y'all think God will help us. But instead, everybody followed the report of the bad spies, the 10 spies. And for 40 years, they were in this wilderness. But Joshua was one of the ones who stood strong. And in Numbers 27:18 through 23, we see he was commissioned to assist Moses with Moses' duties. And then it says in Numbers 32:12, describing him, Joshua followed the Lord fully. So he was a man that followed God. And Numbers 31, verse 23, he was commissioned to replace Moses as leader. Numbers 21:23, if you want to read that sometime. And then we see in Deuteronomy 34, verse 9, he was filled with the spirit of wisdom. When Moses had laid his hand on him and prayed for him, immediately he was filled with the spirit of wisdom. Deuteronomy 1:38, Moses was his mentor. Joshua, God said to Moses, Joshua the son of Nun, who stands before you, he shall enter the promised land. Encourage him, for he will cause Israel to inherit the land. So Moses has told ahead of time, look, Joshua's going to be the leader to lead these folks in. Now encourage him. And then a couple chapters later, Deuteronomy 3:28, Moses is told by the Lord, but charge Joshua and encourage him and strengthen him for the task that will be his. Charge him, encourage him, and strengthen him. See, Joshua was a leader in the making. A leader in the making. I bet when he was climbing that mountain with Moses while he was a teenager, he had no idea that God was using this as the beginning of preparation for him. God knew one day Joshua was going to lead those people in. He's an all-knowing God. He knows what's going to happen in the days ahead. So Joshua was a leader in the making. I reflected back as I was thinking about this message. When I was a young teenager here at this church, John Hall would get me and haul me around with him to make hospital visits and go to see these people in hospitals and stuff. And I learned from watching him. I remember one of the first times, he said, we're going to go see so-and-so. So we'd go see so-and-so in the hospital, and we'd talk for a little bit, and he'd offer words of encouragement. Now, Dallas is going to lead us in prayer. What am I going to say? Well, you had to come up with something quick, right? So I learned to pray around those folks, First I'd hear him pray long years ago, but then he got to where, now Dallas is going to lead us in prayer. And be dogged if every time we didn't go somewhere from that point on, I always had to pray. Anyway, I had no idea that God was using that to prepare me one day to be where I am today. Ministry as a whole, even as a minister of music, I did a lot of hospital visits, and that all prepared me. And just things like that. But let's move on. All that Joshua had been through, especially since his teenage years, when he started following Moses, God used all these things to prepare him for this day we've just read about in Joshua chapter 1. I believe God orchestrated every bit of this, and I also believe God can and will use everything that you and I have been through, both good and bad, both sinful and righteous. God is so powerful, He can use it all to prepare us to be what He wants us to be on that next level. Anybody else believe that? Say, I do. I got a few weak I do's, but I think we all agree inside of our hearts. God can use, that's where Romans 8:28. All things work together for good to them that love God, to those who are called according to His purpose. What is God calling you to do? What assignment does He have for you? It may not be a leadership position. It might be a servant position or something else. But whatever it is, all that you've been through, God will or has used all things in your past. He's capable to use everything you've been through, good and bad, to prepare you for a work. Now, what is that work He's put in your heart? Now, the final thing. I started out by saying that the title of this message was The Big Thing for a Big Assignment. Now, let's look at the big thing. You ready for it? Here's the big thing. This is what he was going to need. We read about it. It first appears in verse 6. He says, be strong and courageous, and you shall give this people possession of the land. Be strong and courageous. He says it in verse 6. Guess what? He said it again in verse 7. Only be strong and, this time, very courageous. Now, I've always heard if God says something twice, he is pretty important. But guess what? He says it a third time. Look at verse 9. Have I not commanded you, be strong and courageous? So there's the big thing. Be strong, be courageous. I thought, you know what, I think I know what this word means, this word strong, but I'm going to look it up in the Hebrew and I'm going to see what it means. And one correct definition is be strong. But it also says be firm. And then these other two definitions, be resolute, be determined. I said, he's talking about mental strength here. Mental strength. Joshua didn't have to get to where he could run 5 or 10 miles without stopping. He didn't have to get to where he could lift more weight than anybody else or beat everybody up. It's not that kind of strength. God was talking about mental strength. He was saying to him, be strong mentally, be courageous mentally. I thought, I can relate to that. God's put me in positions of leader. I know when I started out being a teacher at Grand Ridge High School, back when there was a high school down there. Maybe one day there'll be another high school there. We'll see. But when I was there, my first year of teaching, it was at a point, well, I still like for everybody to like me. Anybody in here you like everybody to like you, right? You don't want anybody to hate you or dislike you. Well, I didn't want to offend any of those students. And that first year, I'll be honest, they ate my lunch. I was just trying to keep them happy and not be firm with discipline and all. And anyway, the principal made it clear to me my last week or two of that first year that I did not have control of my class. He said it real firm. So I thought, well, by George, I know one thing. Keeping my job is more important than keeping them students happy. That was a turning point in my life. So when school started back the next year, if I said sit down and be quiet, guess what? I meant it. And they knew I meant it because I would take other measures. There'd be consequences. So as a leader, you got to be strong. I chose in my mind, I got to be strong. I can't let them sway me. I can't worry about what they think. I got to be bold. I can't be scared that I might lose some band members. My band gets smaller. I thought, well, I got to prove I've got to please this principle. And God told Joshua, be strong, be courageous. That means to me, it wasn't automatic. He had to just make a choice. I'm going to be the leader God called me to, or I'm going to let them be in charge. Which one is it? Be strong, be courageous. Being a leader, you've got to take a stand sometimes. You've got to establish rules. You've got to follow rules that are in place. Now, harder than dealing with students was chaperones on trips. I'd go on these band trips. I'd have it all planned out. Okay, when we get to Gainesville, for example, and this wasn't really the truth, okay, I'll just give you an example because I can't remember it. But I'd have the restaurants picked out. I'd have everything picked out. I'd have it all planned out. I'd assign one chaperone to like every 5 students. I didn't want to try to keep up with 40 students all by myself in a big town somewhere, okay, because we'd go to Busch Garden and different places. You can't keep up with all, so I'd assign them to one parent, one chaperone. Well, guess what? If we were saying we were going to go to McDonald's, there was like one chaperone decided, well, hey, the line's long. I'm going to take my 5. We're going to go across the road over here to Burger King. Guess what? Can I let that go? I can't let that go when checked as a chaperone. I had to call their hand on it. So I let them know, look, these students are maybe you may be the parent at home, but on this trip, I'm in charge. You know, I was nice. And you think that's easy to do? Oh, Lord. You just got to dig down inside and just grab another gear and just, choose. I'm going to be strong. I'm going to be resolute. I'm going to be determined. And that's what God was telling Joshua. You be strong. You be courageous. And you lead these people in. God knew that there was going to be times they were going to try to discourage him. The job I'm in now. With more, further change, you go to more responsibility you got. More people under you got more headaches. Lord, have mercy. That's just the way it goes. But I've had to make decisions where I've had other leadership say, you don't need to do that. And I know this is the way it's supposed to be done. By law, I've got to do this. And, you just have to take the bull by the horns and stand strong, be resolute, be determined. And so with all this, God's telling somebody out here today, look, I'm calling you to be a leader. I'm calling you for this position or that position. Now, since I'm calling you, I'm going to be with you. I'm not going to leave you. You're not going to do this on your own, but you've got to make up your mind that you're going to follow me and you're going to listen to me. You're going to be the man. You're going to be the woman. You're going to be in charge. You're going to stand strong. You're going to be firm. You're going to be determined, resolute. You can't listen to the crowd. You can't please people. Please me. Be strong. Be of good courage. So, the big thing for the big call, be strong and be of good courage. God will help you every step of the way. Let's stand together in prayer.